My daughter-in-law threw a grocery receipt on my kitchen counter and said, "I'm done supporting you. From now on, pay your own way." My son stood behind her and said nothing, so I smiled and agreed. But what she didn't know was simple. The house was mine, the bills were mine, and the life she enjoyed was paid for by me. The lesson: never mistake someone's kindness for weakness. I am completely done supporting you, so from now on, you will pay your own way, Chloe announced, dropping a grocery receipt onto the kitchen counter. My daughter-in-law folded her arms, her posture rigid with an unearned sense of authority in a home she did not own. My son, Mark, stood a few steps behind her, silently inspecting the floorboards instead of looking at his 65-year-old mother. The tension in the room was thick, but I did not panic. I simply picked up my ceramic mug, taking a slow sip of chamomile tea while observing the two of them. They had moved into my home 3 years ago to save for their own place. Yet somehow, Chloe had convinced herself she was the one doing me a favor. She claimed I was a massive financial drain because she occasionally bought my dietary supplements and some extra vegetables. "I mean it, Helen," she continued, her tone sharp and patronizing. "We are splitting all household costs from this exact moment forward. No more free rides. If you want something, you buy it yourself. We are done being your retirement plan." Mark finally glanced up, looking deeply uncomfortable, but he offered absolutely no defense on my behalf. He just nodded passively, completely avoiding my gaze like a frightened child hiding from trouble. I knew exactly what my financial reality was, and I knew how painfully unaware they were of their own. I smiled faintly, set my mug down, and looked directly into Chloe's impatient eyes. "I think that is a very fair arrangement, Chloe," I replied, my voice steady and perfectly calm. "Let us start now." She smirked, believing she had put me in my proper place, entirely blind to reality. The very next morning, Chloe wasted absolutely no time implementing her strict new lifestyle rules. When I walked into the kitchen, I noticed she had physically divided the pantry space with blue painter's tape. She claimed the upper 3 shelves for herself and Mark, leaving me the narrow bottom rack. Inside the refrigerator, sticky notes adorned everything from the milk carton to the butter dish, boldly declaring their exclusive ownership. Mark sat at the island, eating premium eggs while avoiding eye contact with me yet again. Instead of complaining about the disrespect, I quietly grabbed my coat and drove to the local hardware store. I purchased a sturdy mini fridge, a high-quality lockbox, and several heavy storage bins. Over the last 3 years, I had allowed them to slowly take over the garage, the guest room, and the basement with their endless online shopping boxes and unused hobby equipment. If we were truly paying our own ways and separating our lives, it was time for a boundary realignment. I spent the entire afternoon moving all their clutter out of my private spaces, stacking their belongings neatly but firmly in their designated bedroom hallway. I installed the mini fridge in my bedroom, stocking it with my favorite foods. Then, I gathered every single spare key to my house and locked them away securely. When Chloe returned from work and saw her boxes piled up, her jaw practically hit the floor. She marched toward my bedroom, ready to scold me like a disobedient servant. She forcefully grabbed the bedroom doorknob, only to quickly find that it would not turn. I had replaced the simple handle with a solid brass lock that morning while they were both gone. For the very first time since she moved into my peaceful house, she realized I could easily shut doors too. She muttered curses and stomped away, having absolutely no idea how many other doors I was quietly preparing to lock against them very soon. Chloe assumed my new boundaries only applied to bedroom spaces and groceries. She was profoundly mistaken. For 3 years, I had washed their laundry, folded their towels, and scrubbed the main bathroom they use daily. Under our new independent living agreement, that free maid service ended immediately. On Tuesday morning, I gathered only my own clothing and washed it. When I found Mark's dirty gym clothes scattered across the hallway floor, I did not pick them up. I gently kicked them to the side and kept walking. By Thursday, their laundry basket was overflowing into a massive pile. Chloe cornered me near the dishwasher, holding a stained blouse. "Why wasn't this washed?" she demanded, glaring at me angrily. "You always run the machine on Wednesdays." I paused, drying a clean plate with a towel, and gave her a polite smile. "We are taking care of ourselves now, remember?" I replied softly. "I am only responsible for my own things." She huffed, slamming the laundry room door. The reality of household labor was finally hitting her. Meanwhile, I was thoroughly enjoying my newly freed schedule. I spent my afternoons reading on the porch and tending to my garden. But the chores were only a minor fraction of what I actually contributed to their comfortable existence. They had grown accustomed to a lifestyle completely subsidized by my quiet generosity, assuming that the lights stayed on by magic and the house maintained itself for free. I opened my laptop, navigating to my private banking portal. It was time to review the automatic payments that kept this property running. Chloe wanted utter financial independence, and I was going to grant her exactly what she asked for. But she would soon discover independence came with a very steep price tag she could not afford. I smiled as I removed my personal checking account from every shared household auto payment, effective after the current billing cycle. The following weekend, Mark emailed me a shared spreadsheet titled Household Contributions. Chloe had clearly designed it, meticulously dividing every minor expense by 3. They listed trash bags, dish soap, and even the electricity bill, highlighting my exact 33% share in bright red. I sat at my desk, adjusting my reading glasses, and analyzed their petty mathematics. They had conveniently forgotten that I owned this house outright. Because I never bragged about money, they assumed I was broke. They did not realize I had quietly paid off the mortgage 5 years ago using my late husband's life insurance. Nor did they know I covered the hefty annual property taxes and comprehensive home insurance entirely out of pocket. Since they wanted strict equality, I decided to update their little spreadsheet. I added 3 new rows at the bottom. The first row was for property taxes. The second row was for homeowners insurance. The third row was fair market rent for a master bedroom and garage parking in our desirable neighborhood. I divided those massive numbers to reflect their 66% share. I then uploaded official PDF documents proving the exact costs, ensuring no one could argue with the raw data. Instead of demanding immediate payment, I simply saved the file and closed my laptop, waiting for them to notice. Later that evening, I heard Mark log onto the computer in the den. I sat in my locked room, sipping water, listening to the silence of the house. Suddenly, a sharp gasp echoed down the hall, followed by frantic whispering between my son and his arrogant wife. They had finally seen the updated numbers. Realizing their demand for financial separation was a monumental mistake that would cost them dearly every single month. For years, they lived under the bold delusion that they were the generous providers, graciously allowing me to survive. Now, cold mathematics proved exactly who was actually carrying the heavy financial burden here. True panic was rapidly brewing tonight. The next morning, Chloe stomped into the kitchen holding a printed copy of the spreadsheet. Her face was flushed with anger, and Mark trailed behind her, looking thoroughly exhausted. I was calmly scrambling an egg on the stove, ignoring her dramatic entrance. "What is this?" "Helen," she snapped, slamming the paper onto the counter. "You cannot charge us rent. We are family, and those tax numbers are completely ridiculous." I turned off the burner and plated my breakfast. "Family," I echoed, raising a single brow. "Family does not hand a mother a bill for dish soap. You clearly stated you were done supporting me and wanted total financial separation. I am simply honoring your terms." Mark stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, come on. We cannot afford $2,000 a month just to live here. We are trying to save for our own house." I looked at my son, feeling a brief pang of sadness for how weak he had become. "You have lived here rent-free for 3 years, Mark," I stated plainly, keeping my emotions perfectly checked. "Instead of saving, you bought designer clothes and expensive gadgets. That was your choice. My choice is to stop subsidizing your lifestyle." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms. "We will not pay it. You need us here to take care of you." I let out a short, genuine laugh. I walked past them, taking my plate to the dining table. "If you choose not to pay your share of the household expenses, you can pack your bags and leave," I replied without looking back. They stood frozen in the kitchen, realizing I held all the cards, and my boundaries were now made of solid steel. The cruel bluff they tried to run on me had failed spectacularly, leaving them completely trapped in a harsh financial reality they created. They wanted adult independence, but they had no idea what it actually cost. I smiled, enjoying my quiet, peaceful breakfast entirely alone. Over the next 2 weeks, the atmosphere in the house became incredibly strained. Chloe stubbornly refused to acknowledge my updated spreadsheet, continuing to buy her expensive organic groceries while pointedly ignoring my presence. Mark avoided me entirely, leaving for work early and returning late. They thought if they simply ignored the problem, I would eventually cave and return to my role as their silent provider. They underestimated my resolve. While they played childish avoidance games, I was busy organizing my next move. Years ago, before Mark was even married, I had quietly purchased a small, beautiful condominium closer to the coast as an investment property. It was currently sitting empty because the previous tenants had just relocated. I drove down there on a sunny Wednesday afternoon, inspecting the freshly painted walls and the peaceful balcony overlooking a quiet park. It was perfect for a single woman looking for tranquility. Back at the main house, I began slowly packing my most treasured belongings. I did not make a dramatic scene or leave empty boxes in the hallway. I carefully wrapped my favorite books, family heirlooms, and personal documents, placing them neatly in the trunk of my car during the day. I also contacted a reputable property management company. I signed a standard contract authorizing them to lease out my large suburban home at full market value. I knew Chloe and Mark could not pass a strict background check or meet the income requirements to stay, especially with their high credit card debt. My plans were completely solidified without uttering a single threat. They wanted to be independent adults. So I was giving them the ultimate opportunity to prove it very soon. The first of the month arrived quickly. I walked into the living room and placed a plain white envelope on the coffee table right in front of Chloe and Mark. They were watching television, but Mark muted it as he cautiously picked up the envelope. Inside was a printed invoice detailing their exact monthly share, 66% of the prorated property taxes and homeowners insurance, plus fair market rent for their bedroom, garage parking, and shared access to the house. "Payment is due today," I announced casually, adjusting my watch. Chloe stared at the total amount, her face draining of all color. "We do not have this kind of cash." "Helen," This is practically everything we have left after our car loans and credit cards. How are we supposed to eat, pay utilities, or survive the month? I offered a mild shrug. That is not my concern. Chloe, you told me to support myself. I am simply asking you to do the exact same thing in the house I own. Mark rubbed his temples, looking visibly panicked. Mom, please be reasonable. We made a mistake. Let us just go back to the way things were. We will stop splitting the grocery bills and utilities. I shook my head slowly, feeling absolutely no desire to return to a dynamic where I was quietly disrespected every single day. No, Mark, I replied firmly. Chloe was right. Independence is very important. I have realized I enjoy managing my own space without feeling like a massive burden to my family. Chloe crossed her arms, trying to regain her lost leverage. Well, we are not paying it. You will just have to deal with us staying here for free. I smiled warmly. I anticipated that response. I said calmly, which is exactly why I have made other arrangements. They both stared at me, completely confused, waiting for the final blow to securely land. The heavy silence in the room was absolutely deafening as they finally understood I was not bluffing about my strict boundaries. Everything was permanently changing. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a glossy folder provided by the property management company. I set it gently beside their unpaid invoice. Since you cannot afford the rent and household upkeep, I explained in a steady, practical tone, I have decided to lease this entire house to new tenants who can... My attorney has prepared the formal notice, and the property managers have already lined up qualified tenants once the house is vacant. Chloe's eyes widened in sheer horror. You are kicking us out, she practically screamed, losing all her previous composure. Where are we supposed to go? We do not have a deposit saved up for an apartment. You have 30 days under the formal notice, I replied, ignoring her sudden outburst. I am moving into my private condo on the coast this weekend. The management company will handle the rest of the transition. They will conduct the final walkthrough and collect your keys. Mark looked completely defeated, staring blankly at the floor. He finally realized that by allowing his wife to treat me like a financial parasite, he had destroyed his own safety net. He had traded a comfortable, supportive home for a petty power trip that completely backfired. Mom, I am so sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. I looked at him, feeling no anger, only a quiet sense of closure. I know you are, Mark, but apologies do not pay the bills, I said softly. You both wanted to live as completely separate adults. This is what that looks like in the real world. I picked up my handbag and turned toward the hallway, leaving them sitting in the messy reality of their own terrible choices. By Saturday morning, the house felt entirely different. I had hired a small local moving crew to transport my locked storage bins and favorite antique furniture to my condominium. Chloe stayed hidden inside their bedroom, likely furiously searching the internet for cheap rental apartments they could actually afford. Mark awkwardly hovered near the front door, watching the movers carry away the beautiful armchairs and lamps that made the living room feel like a real home. Without my belongings, the space looked painfully empty and cold, reflecting the true nature of their relationship. Do you need help carrying anything else? Mark asked quietly, offering a pathetic olive branch. No, thank you, I replied, signing the clipboard the lead mover handed me. They have it all handled. Remember, the property managers will contact you on Monday regarding the strict move-out procedures. He nodded slowly, looking around the bare walls. Chloe is terrified. Mom, we do not have a place lined up yet. I paused at the doorway, holding my car keys. I did not yell or gloat. I just spoke the plain, undeniable truth. You are a grown man. Mark, You allowed your wife to disrespect your mother in her own home over grocery receipts. You chose this path, and now you must walk it. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the heavy front door securely behind me. I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The drive to the coast was incredibly peaceful, filled with bright sunshine and the comforting sound of my favorite classical music playing softly on the radio. A new chapter was finally beginning. When I eventually arrived at my beautiful coastal sanctuary, I confidently unlocked the door and took a deep, refreshing breath of the clean, salty air. There were no hostile glares, no petty financial spreadsheets, and absolutely no ungrateful relatives waiting inside. I was completely free from their heavy, toxic burden, fully ready to embrace my peaceful, independent life, moving smoothly forward without looking back. 6 months have passed since that fateful moving day. I am currently sitting on my balcony, drinking herbal tea and watching the sunset paint the ocean orange and pink. My old house is now rented out, and the income arrives every month without drama. I recently learned through a mutual family friend that Mark and Chloe had to downsize drastically. They are now renting a tiny, cramped apartment near the noisy highway. Chloe was forced to take a second job just to cover their basic utilities, and their designer lifestyle has entirely evaporated. Mark called me once last month. He sounded exhausted and asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss fixing our relationship. I agreed, but I set very strict conditions before accepting. I told him I would happily see him, but Chloe was not welcome, and I would never discuss money or provide financial assistance ever again. He accepted those terms reluctantly, finally understanding that my boundaries were absolute and permanent. That was the lesson they had refused to learn. Independence is not a threat you throw at someone else. It is a responsibility you carry yourself. Chloe wanted me to stand alone. So I did, and in the end, I stood stronger than ever. I no longer argue with people who mistake my kindness for weakness. I simply close the door, protect my peace, and let reality finish the conversation.